She woke up to flashing lights breaking through her windows. Red, blue, white, and a helicopter on her house. She thought it was a dream. She never thought anyone knew about her. A loud knock hit the front door, hard enough to shake the frame. "Ma'am, police, please answer the door." She stood there in her night clothes, confused, frightened, still half asleep. She had no idea what was happening or why her quiet house suddenly looked like a crime scene. When she opened the door, the first question came immediately. "Anything wounded in there?" She froze. The question felt serious in a way she wasn't ready for. Her mind raced. She looked behind her at the small hallway, at the living room, at the bedroom she had just left. She didn't know how to answer that question. She didn't even know where to begin to explain herself, let alone defend herself. The thought of a lawyer crossed her mind and disappeared just as fast. She couldn't afford one. She barely afforded herself. She stood there, alone in her doorway, with two dogs she didn't plan to keep, and a situation she never imagined. And all she could think was this: she had only tried to help. Before we start, please subscribe. When we hit 100,000 subscribers, I'll be buying a dog I truly admire, a Tibetan Mastiff. Let me know in the comments, do I have bad taste, or is that a solid choice? Martha had learned how to live with silence. Not the peaceful kind people talk about, the real kind, but the one that settles into corners and stays there. For years, it had just been her and the house. Same routine, same rooms, chair by the window where she sat every evening until her eyes grew heavy. She knew every sound the place made. The soft tick of the clock in the hall. The way the floorboard near the kitchen complained if you stepped on it wrong. The hum of the refrigerator late at night when everything else finally stopped moving. She didn't mind it anymore, or at least, she told herself she didn't. That night was no different at first. She finished washing the last cup, dried it slowly, and put it back in its place. She locked the doors like she always did, checked the back latch twice like she always did, and turned off the lights one by one until the house went dark. Midnight came and went. Martha lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet she knew so well. Then she heard something that didn't belong there. It came before sleep could fully take her, faint, easy to mistake for a dream, so faint she almost ignored it. A sound carried on the cold air outside. Thin, uneven, not the wind, not the trees, something alive. She held her breath and listened. There it was again, a soft crying sound. Broken, like it hurt to make it. Her chest tightened before her mind could catch up. She hadn't heard a sound like that in years. The memory came before she invited it. Finn. She could see him clearly now, as if he had been waiting. The way he used to sit by the door when he was young, whining softly when he wanted in or out, or just wanted to know she was still there. The way his head rested against her leg when the nights felt too long. The way the house had sounded when he was alive, full. Her throat burned. She hadn't thought of Finn like this in a long time. Not sharply. Not suddenly. Losing him had taught her how not to remember too much at once. Another cry came from outside. This one is closer. Martha pushed herself upright in bed, heart beating faster now. She told herself it could be anything. A fox, a stray. The cold is making strange sounds, but deep down she knew better. She wrapped her robe around herself and stood there for a moment, hand resting on the bedpost. She didn't want to open the door. The crying came again. Softer now. Weaker. Martha moved anyway. She picked up the small lamp from the hallway and walked toward the back door, her steps slow, careful. When she reached the door, she paused, pressing her forehead lightly against the wood. "Just look," she whispered. "That's all." She unlocked it and opened it just enough to peer out. Cold air rushed in, sharp and biting, making her gasp. The porch light flickered on, and in its glow she saw them. Two dogs. They were sitting close together near the door, bodies tense, fur dull with cold. One had its head lowered. The other looked up at her, eyes dark and tired. They didn't bark, didn't move, just waited. Martha's hand tightened around the doorframe. For a moment, all she could hear was her own breathing and the echo of Finn's soft sounds in her memory. The way he used to look at her when he needed something, trusted her with it. The smaller dog let out another quiet cry. That decided it. She opened the door wider. "Come in," she said, her voice barely steady. "Before you freeze out there." They hesitated. Then slowly, as if afraid the offer might disappear, they stepped inside. Martha closed the door and leaned against it for a second, eyes closed, heart racing. The house felt different immediately. Not loud, just occupied. She led them toward the bedroom because it was the warmest place. She didn't think about it. She just moved. She grabbed an old blanket from the closet, laid it carefully at the end of the bed, and gestured gently. They lay down almost at once. Exhaustion pulled them under fast. Martha watched them for a long moment. The way their sides rose and fell. The way they stayed close even in sleep. She didn't think about tomorrow. She didn't think about where they came from. She thought she had simply helped two homeless dogs survive the night. She turned off the lamp, climbed into bed, and stared into the dark. For the first time in years, the house didn't sound empty. She fell asleep believing that was all this was, just warmth, kindness, and just one night. She had no idea how wrong she was. She went asleep believing the next day would be normal and spent most of it doing small, ordinary things. The kind of things that don't feel important while you're doing them. Fill bowls, rinse towels with slow moves so the dogs wouldn't feel rushed. The bigger dog followed her at a distance, always a few steps behind. Not scared exactly. Like it needed to know where she was at all times but didn't want to be noticed for it. The smaller one stayed closer to the floor, corners, chair legs, the space beneath the table. Wherever it could still see her shoes, she took that as a good sign. Animals that are afraid don't usually watch. They hide. After breakfast, she noticed the wounds more clearly. In the daylight, they didn't look fresh. They looked old, not bleeding, just wrong. Scratches along the side, a patch of skin where fur didn't grow right. One ear with a rough edge like it had been torn and healed badly. She crouched down slowly and let the bigger dog sniff her hand. It did once, then stepped back. "That's all right," she said softly. "We'll take it slow." She didn't think of abuse nor cruelty. She thought of the woods beyond the road. Fallen branches, wire fences, coyotes that came too close sometimes. Dogs got hurt out there, it happened. She found an old first aid box in the bathroom. The one she hadn't opened in years. Warm water, clean cloth, a little antiseptic. She worked gently, stopping whenever the dog stiffened. Talking the whole time, not because she thought they understood the words, but because silence sometimes felt heavier. "There," she murmured. "That's better, just a scrape." The smaller dog watched from across the room, head tilted, eyes wide. When she finished, she stepped back and washed her hands. The bigger dog stayed where it was for a long moment. Then it did something that surprised her. It lay down, not near the door, not near the window, right there on the rug. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Lunch was simple. She didn't have dog food. She hadn't planned on company. She tore bread into pieces, mixed it with a little broth, and added some leftovers she'd planned to throw out. They ate so well that she even smiled. It was like appreciation. She noticed they never fought over food, never pushed. They took turns without being told. That made her pause. Wild dogs didn't do that. But she pushed the thought away. By afternoon, the house felt lived in. Not louder, just warmer. The dogs moved with her. When she sat, they settled. When she stood, they watched. When she laughed at the radio host saying something foolish, the smaller dog's tail thumped once against the floor like it liked the sound. She hadn't heard that sound in a long time. At some point, she realized she hadn't spoken to herself all day. That was new. She noticed the collar again when the bigger dog stretched. It was thick. old, worn down. The clasp looked strange. Too clean, she frowned for a second. Maybe someone cut it off after it got caught on something, she thought. Fences did that. Branches too, she told herself. She was overthinking. People lose dogs all the time. She would call around in the morning. As the sun dropped lower, the dogs shifted closer to the heater again, like they'd learned its pattern already. She made dinner, real dinner this time. She set aside pieces without thinking. It felt natural. When night came, it came fast. The cold pressed harder against the windows. The wind rose again. She locked the doors, checked them twice, not because she was scared, but because old habits don't fade. The dogs settled in without being told. The smaller one curled into itself like it wanted to disappear into warmth. The bigger one lay sideways, one eye open, watching the room. She turned off the lights and sat in her chair, wrapped in a blanket. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like the house was too big. She felt tired in a good way. Before she fell asleep, she thought again about calling someone. Tomorrow, she promised herself, tomorrow she'd do it properly. Right now, they were safe. That's all she thought she was giving them. She didn't know the night would end with engines. She didn't know lights would cut through her curtains. She didn't know this quiet day, this ordinary kindness, was already tied to something much bigger than her. She just thought she'd help 2 dogs through the cold. And for that day, that was enough. She wasn't woken by an alarm or a neighbor. Martha woke to a sound that didn't belong in her world. Not the quiet kind, not the gentle kind. This noise was sharp, mechanical, and heavy. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. Her room was still dark, the dogs still asleep at the end of the bed, their bodies warm and close. Then the sound came again, deeper this time, vibrating through the walls. A low thudding rhythm from above. The dogs stirred. One lifted its head. The other stood up slowly, ears pulled back, body tense. They didn't bark, they didn't run, they pressed closer to her bed instead. Martha sat up, heart pounding. Then the light came, flashing through the curtains, spilling across the walls like something broken. The house filled with moving shadows, sharp and fast. Her quiet home looked suddenly exposed, like it had been placed on a stage. She swung her feet onto the floor just as a loud voice echoed outside. "Police! Stay inside the house!" Her breath caught in her throat. Police! The dogs froze and she could hear engines now. Multiple vehicles, doors opening, boots on gravel, and above it all, that same heavy thudding from the sky, slow and steady. A helicopter. Her house was surrounded. Martha stood there in her night clothes, robe tied tight, lamp shaking in her hand. For one terrifying second, she wondered if she had done something wrong without knowing it, if kindness had finally caught up with her in a way she didn't understand. She moved toward the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to look. Squad cars lined the road, lights flashing. Officers moving carefully, hands near their belts. The helicopter hovered low, its spotlight cutting across her yard, her shed, the trees beyond. It looked like a crime scene. The dogs pressed against her legs now, trembling. One leaned its full weight into her calf like it was trying to disappear into her. "It's all right," she whispered, though she didn't believe it herself. A knock came at the door. The flashing lights moved across the walls like something alive, cutting through the dark of her bedroom. For a moment, she didn't understand what she was seeing. She sat up slowly, heart racing, trying to place the sound that followed. Voices not close, not far, everywhere. A loud knock hit the front door, hard enough to shake the frame. "Ma'am, police. Please answer the door." She stood there in her night clothes, confused, frightened, still half asleep. She had no idea what was happening or why her quiet house suddenly looked like a criminal's house. When she opened the door, the first question came immediately. "How many people are inside the house?" She froze. The question felt serious in a way she wasn't ready for. Her mind raced. She looked behind her at the small hallway, at the living room, at the bedroom she had just left. It's just me," she said, then stopped. She glanced down. The two dogs stood behind her, pressed close, silent. "And the dogs," she added. "2 dogs." The officer's expression didn't change. "Are the dogs yours?" She hesitated. "I take care of them," she said finally. That wasn't the answer they wanted. "You haven't answered the question, ma'am." Another officer stepped forward, his face serious but not unkind. His eyes moved past her, scanning the inside of the house. "We received a report," he said carefully. "About 2 dogs." Martha blinked. "Dogs?" "Yes, ma'am. 2 large dogs matching a description." Her heart dropped into her stomach. "They're here," she said quietly. "They came to my door last night. They were freezing." The officer nodded once, as if that confirmed something he already knew. "May we come in?" She stepped aside. The dogs stayed with her. They didn't bolt. They didn't growl. They followed her like shadows as the officers entered her home. More officers, not aggressive, just alert. One knelt slowly, lowering himself to the dog's level, hands open, voice calm. "They're not strays," another officer said from behind. "At least not officially." Martha turned toward him. "I don't understand." One of the officers pulled out a tablet, scrolling through images. He showed her 2 photos. Her breath caught. It was them. The same tired eyes. The same scar near one ear she had noticed earlier when she cleaned their fur with a warm cloth. "They were reported missing," he said. "Months ago." "Where?" she asked. The officer hesitated. "A city facility." The words sat heavy in the room. Martha looked down at the dogs. One of them leaned its head against her leg, slow and careful, like it had learned not to ask for much. "I didn't steal them," she said, her voice firmer now. "I didn't even know they belonged to anyone." "We know," the first officer said quickly. "You're not in trouble." Another officer spoke, quieter this time. "The report says they were classified as a hold case. Unit 0. Martha frowned. "What does that mean?" No one answered right away. Instead, one of the officers looked around her house. The clean bowls, the blanket at the end of the bed, and the kettle still warm from earlier. "You took care of them," he said. "Yes," she replied simply, "because they needed it." The room went quiet. The helicopter noise faded as it pulled back, the lights outside dimming slightly. The tension shifted, but it didn't leave. "These dogs were supposed to be gone," the officer finally said. "They were never marked as adopted, never transferred, just moved." "Moved where?" Martha asked. After the questions slowed and the radios quieted, the officers didn't rush. They moved through her house with care, not like men searching for fault, but like people trying not to disturb something fragile. One of them knelt again near the dogs. They didn't pull away. That seemed to surprise him. "Calm," he said quietly to no one in particular. "They've had a long day," Martha replied. "So have I." A few officers exchanged looks. One stepped aside and spoke into his radio in a low voice, turning his back to her. She didn't try to listen. Whatever they were sorting out no longer felt like it belonged to her. All she knew was that the dogs stayed close, too close. Every time a voice rose or a door opened, they shifted nearer to her legs. When an officer reached into his pocket for a pen, one of them flinched, then steadied itself like it had learned that reacting too fast only made things worse. Martha noticed, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she sat down at the table and folded her hands. The dogs lay at her feet. She rested her heel lightly against one warm back, just to remind herself that they were real. An older officer finally pulled a chair across from her. "Ma'am," he said gently, "we're going to need to take them with us." Her chest tightened. "For how long?" she asked. "I don't know yet," she nodded once. She had lived long enough to know when answers weren't ready to be given. "They'll be handled carefully," he added. "I promise you that." She looked down at the dogs and felt something small and sharp settle behind her ribs. She had only known them for a day, maybe less, but the house already felt shaped around them. She stood up slowly. "Let me get their blankets," she said. No one stopped her. She folded the towel she'd used to dry them, picked up the spare sweater she'd turned into a pillow. She added the bowl with the chipped rim because the smaller dog had eaten from that one first. When she came back, the officers were waiting. They moved slowly, speaking softly, offering hands instead of leashes at first. The dogs hesitated, then followed Martha's lead. When she nodded, they went. At the door, the bigger dog paused. It looked back at the room, at the heater. At the end of the bed, then it looked at her. She crouched, placing her palm flat against its chest. "You did good," she whispered. "All of you did." The door closed behind them. The lights outside faded, engines started, one by one the cars left. The helicopter was already gone. Silence returned too quickly. Martha stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the dark yard as if the dogs might wander back on their own, confused, wondering why everyone had made such a fuss. They didn't. Morning came quietly. She made tea out of habit, and she found that she had counted the dogs for breakfast, and now the house felt larger than it had yesterday, not emptier, just louder in its stillness. Late in the afternoon, a single car pulled into her driveway. One officer stepped out. The same man who had shown her the photos. "I told them I'd come back," he said, removing his hat. She let him in. Alive," he said right away. "Both of them." She closed her eyes. "They're hurt," he continued, choosing his words carefully. "Not the kind of hurt you see all at once, but they're being treated properly because of you." She shook her head. "I just fed them." "That's not all you did," he said. "You kept them visible, warm, and you didn't hide them. You didn't even turn them away." He hesitated before adding, "If they'd gone somewhere else, we might not have found them in time." She sat down slowly. "They were never meant to be seen," he said. "Some places don't like reminders, they don't like questions." "What happens now?" she asked. "There will be investigations, people will talk, some will be angry." He smiled faintly. "Others will be grateful." He stood and turned toward the door, then stopped. "They asked if you wanted 2 puppies," he said. "Temporary, until things settle." She considered it, then shook her head. "No," she said softly. "They should go back together when this is over, if they can." The officer nodded, understanding more than she said. When he left, she returned to her chair. But the days after felt unreal to Martha, like time had softened around the edges. People came, though she hadn't asked them to. The officials she didn't recognize, then neighbors who had never knocked before, then quiet cars that stopped at the end of her driveway and left again without anyone getting out. The world had noticed her house, finally, and it didn't know what to do with that. She kept her routine anyway. She woke early. She swept the porch. She made tea and sat by the window. At night, she still laid the extra blanket at the end of the bed, even though no one slept there anymore. She told herself it was just habit, but habit had a way of holding meaning when words failed. One afternoon, a woman from the city came with papers and a voice that sounded rehearsed. She talked about reviews, protocols, failures. She said words like oversight and restructuring. Martha listened without interrupting. When the woman finished, Martha asked one question. "Will it happen again?" The woman didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Not there." That was enough. A week later, the place the dogs came from was closed, quietly. No signs, no announcements, just locked doors and an empty lot that people suddenly pretended they hadn't passed every day. The dogs became a story people whispered about. Some said it was neglect. Others said it was cruelty dressed up as order. Martha didn't repeat any of it. She didn't need to. She only knew what she had felt when they pressed against her legs in the dark. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted her walls gold, the familiar car returned. The same officer stepped out, but this time he wasn't alone. The dogs walked beside him. They moved slower now. Their fur was cleaner. their eyes clearer though still cautious. Bandages peeked through in places and their steps were careful, like they were learning how to trust solid ground again. Martha didn't speak. She just opened the door. They asked where they should go, the officer said. We told them the truth. He paused, then added, they remembered you. The smaller dog reached her first, nose brushing her hand, uncertain. The larger one followed, pressing close, steady and warm. Martha knelt, her hands shaking as she rested them against their backs. I didn't expect you back so soon, she whispered. They'll still be checked on, the officer said. There will be follow-ups, records. She looked up at him. Good. He smiled once, then left them alone. That night Martha cleaned them slowly. She warmed water on the stove. She wiped dried dirt from paws. She spoke softly, not to calm them, but to remind herself she was real, that this was happening. They slept near the bed again, not at the end this time, closer. Word spread after that. Not loudly, not proudly. Just enough. People brought old blankets, then quietly took some back when she refused more than she needed. A few families came asking about puppies that had been moved from the same place. They didn't have money, but they had space and time and patience. The dogs found homes that way, recorded, followed, watched, not forgotten. Martha didn't take many, she kept these two. And the puppies she had already planned to bring home before any of this began. Some nights when the house grew quiet again, she thought of Finn. Not with pain this time, with something softer. Love didn't replace love, it made room. People would later say her kindness changed things, policies, procedures, reputations. Martha never corrected them. She knew the truth. She had only opened a door. And sometimes that was enough.